Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. There is a place on Luna where even the stars seem to hold their breath. Nestled within the ancient crust of the moon, older than the Imperium itself, older even than the Age of Strife, lies a crater that has never been fully mapped. At its heart, sealed under bedrock and stasis fields, surrounded by labyrinthine catacombs and defenses too old for any existing archive, lies the Golden Room. No name is spoken of it officially. No record exists in the Mechanicus databanks, and yet every High Lord knows of it. Every custodian walks Luna with subtle paths avoiding its perimeter. It is the kind of place that defines an empire not by what it contains, but by what it must never allow to be revealed. We don't know what lies within. Not truly. But across the centuries, fragments have emerged, half-glimpsed visions from psychers driven mad, cryptic logs from deep ether scanning drones, silence from vox channels that never return. It is said that the Emperor once walked that crater in silence, alone, long before unity was declared. And what he buried there, he did so not with the triumph of a conqueror, but with the sorrow of a father sealing away a truth too heavy for his children to bear. The Golden Room may be a vault, a prison, a reliquary, or all of these at once. And the closer one looks, the more Luna itself seems to resist the question, as though the moon has been taught to forget. Long before the Imperium raised its banners across Terra and the stars beyond, Luna was already old. Not merely in the cosmic sense, but spiritually, geologically, and culturally. The battered satellite that now bristles with imperial cathedrals and forged spires once knew the touch of forces ancient and long forgotten. Beneath the silvery dust and regolith, ancient strata tell a story not recorded in any human chronicle. And it is within this layered memory of the moon that we find the scar. An immense crater, older than recorded time, older even than the first gene labs or vaults built into Luna's marrow. This is not simply a hollow left by a meteor or bombardment. Some say the crater was never formed by natural impact at all, but by the will of beings far beyond comprehension, in wars that predate human thought. The Imperium's maps name it in cold numeric designations. But those who dwell long on Luna, the silent workers in the deep mines, the acolytes of the Ordo Chronos, and the genecraft priests of the old vaults, whisper different names. The first wound, the celestial seal, the scar of the betrayer. Each name a memory echo, passed like dreams between generations who are never told too much, but understand enough to fear it. Lunar seismology scans performed during the early days of the Great Crusade revealed anomalies beneath this crater. Metallic forms arranged in patterns inconsistent with natural geology. These were not the ruins of cities, nor the bones of titanic machines. They were something else entirely. Structures that seemed to shift under observation, that resisted classification, whose internal geometry looped and contradicted itself. During the Dark Age of technology, Luna had already become a staging ground for humanity's vast expansion. Yet even then, records imply this crater was left untouched. And that silence, within an era of boundless curiosity and recklessness, suggests that even then, something was known, or perhaps unknowable. Some of the few remaining logs recovered from pre-Age of Strife orbital installations speak of failed landings, of scanning devices going blind, of psychometric readings inducing emotional breakdowns in machine minds. An entire colony arc once attempted excavation beneath the crater. It is not listed among lost expeditions. It is simply absent from all records, as though it never existed. In the early unification wars, the Emperor himself sought out Luna, not merely to secure orbital dominance, but to gain control over the vaults buried beneath its crust. The battles against the lunar gene cults are well known, their twisted forms and unsanctioned bio-horrors wiped clean by the Legio Custodes and nascent Proto-Astartes. But beneath these open conflicts lay a deeper motive. The Emperor moved not only to cleanse but to seal. The crater was never mentioned in his proclamations. It was simply cordoned off and shrined in silence, shielded not only from physical approach, but from record, remembrance, and rumor. What would cause the most powerful psychic mind in the galaxy to be so deliberate in his erasure? There are some in the Ordo Malleus who believe that the crater marks the site of a fallen god. Not a warp entity, not a demon, but something else, something older. A being that was not defeated but shattered, its essence bound in architecture beyond our ken. Others believe it was not a prison, but a birthing ground, a place where the fabric of reality thinned, where the ancient architects of humanity might have first reached into the veil and pulled forth something new, and then recoiled in horror. The crater, in this view, is not the result of violence, but of containment, an act of sealing so vast that it left a wound on Luna itself. Luna remembers, even if we do not. It shudders beneath the dust when certain constellations align. The ground hums with subsonic vibrations once every 87 years, a rhythm no seismic event explains. Lunar servitors placed too near the site cease function and speak in reversed speech before their cogitators fail. Even the Sisters of Silence, who sometimes walk the perimeter in silent vigil, are known to carry additional wards and relics when they do. And when asked, they say nothing, only that it is not a place meant to be known. Not now. Perhaps not ever. The surface of Luna glitters with the burnished gold of imperial dominion, but beneath its dust and ash lie secrets older and darker than any cathedral or fortress monastery. Before the moon became the throne world's orbital shield, it was a place of silent genius and unforgivable trespass. During the Emperor's early efforts to reclaim Terra, Luna was not simply a strategic point of access. It was a key, an archive, a crucible, and a cage. Its hidden depths housed the first true echo of what would later become the Emperor's masterwork, the Astartes. Yet what we call the Gene Labs today are but the clean names left behind for horrors so profound that even the Mechanicus tread lightly when scanning the sublunar vaults. These were not laboratories in the sense understood by modern science. They were crypts of innovation, subterranean caverns reinforced with materials whose composition defies replication. The early gene crafters worked here in service to a purpose they could not fully understand, drawn by the Emperor's psychic compulsion, or perhaps by their own reckless curiosity. The original designs of the Space Marines were only part of their project. Some claim prototypes too powerful, too unstable, or too sapient were developed in those depths. These failed creations were not destroyed. They were stored, sealed, or perhaps sacrificed to something far deeper, perhaps even the vault beneath the oldest crater. Over time, many of the laboratories became overgrown by their own defense systems. Automated guardians bred biobeasts and living walls of weaponized tissue fused with metal grew restless without their creators. These forbidden zones, marked only by faded sigils and decaying noospheric locks, are often sealed under layers of myth and disinformation. What little the Imperium does say, when it says anything, is always cloaked in euphemism. Genetic instability, environmental collapse, psychic toxicity. But those who have delved deeper, those whose minds still tremble from their brush with the truth, whisper of a deeper reason. That the genetic experiments were not just about soldiers. They were about understanding something beneath the moon, something the Emperor feared but would not destroy. There is one particularly persistent legend among the Ordo Redactor, a theory deemed so dangerous it is purged each time it appears in formal record. It claims that the Emperor once attempted to grow a being, not a Primarch, but something greater, something even closer to his own essence. A reflection not of war or conquest, but of pure will. But this being was too perfect, too aware. It looked back at its creator and knew him too well. What became of it remains unknown, but some believe its containment chamber is the Golden Room. Others argue it never truly lived, merely existed as potential, pure psychic density congealed in a physical shell. A shell now buried beneath that ancient wound on Luna, locked in eternal suspension, neither alive nor dead. The Golden Room might have been constructed during these genetic experiments not as a cell, but as an anchor. A psychic bulwark, forged to hold back the spiritual gravity of a being so vast it would distort reality around it if allowed to awaken. This would explain the stasis locks, the null field convergence zones, the strange electromagnetic silences detected only in that crater. The Gene Labs were not just sites of creation, but stations of vigilance. They were interfaces, ritual biotech centers designed to maintain the containment protocols. And as time wore on, and the Terran conquest shifted toward the stars, the Emperor buried these functions beneath layers of bureaucracy and fear, ensuring that no one would ever reactivate what was forgotten. The Mechanicus, of course, knows more than it admits. Several attempts to catalog the deepest vaults beneath the crater have ended in disaster. Entire survey teams dissolved into pink vapor as soon as they crossed specific thresholds. Others returned without eyes or tongues, bleeding from ears and speaking names that did not fit in any known human phoneme set. The tech priests mark the region as Omicron Gamma Null Zone Theta, but the few adepts who survive encounters with its perimeter call it simply the living edge. It is the point where machine, man, and memory fail, and whatever lies beyond, whatever golden light flickers beneath the moon's oldest scar, is not meant to be seen by anything born of flesh. So the gene labs remain, not truly abandoned but dreaming. Their systems flicker occasionally in bursts of coded breath, as though the very infrastructure of the moon has grown nervous. Dull red lights blink in patterns that match no known warning code. And in the deepest zones, it is said that the walls hum with the pulse of something asleep, or pretending to be. The Adeptus Custodes are not creatures of chance. Every step they take, every post they are assigned, every shadow they watch is deliberate, divinely calculated, not by dogma, but by necessity, known only to them and the throne. So when custodians walk the paths of Luna in silence, when they patrol sections of the moon's surface where there are no official records of threat or interest, it means something more than mere vigilance. Over the millennia, observers have noted that a small contingent of custodians, never more than 7, has always been stationed on Luna, even during the darkest days of the heresy and the scouring aftermath, and they do not guard the orbital docks. They walk only in the dead zones. They move with purpose around the crater no one names. These warriors of golden armor and absolute will carry no standard here. They make no declarations. Instead, they perform what some have described as ritualistic perambulations, silent walks that trace the perimeter of the oldest crater, always equidistant, never crossing the lip, never descending into the basin. Even in the Imperium's most desperate hours, this formation has remained unchanged. The rare moments where their route is interrupted by natural disaster, atmospheric interference, or other disruption have coincided with psychic shudders felt by astropaths across the Sol system. There are no official correlations in the archives, of course, but the black ships come to Luna with more frequency than most realize, and they never land near that crater. They deploy teams in silence, far away, and extract them quickly, assuming any return at all. It is said among certain high-level Terran adepts that the Emperor gave the Custodes only 2 absolute orders during the unification: guard the Imperial Palace and guard the Golden Room. While the first is visible to all, the gleaming sentinels on every gate of the Sanctum Imperialis, the second is a whispered truth passed only to those who have walked the corridors of the Heteron Guard. The Golden Room, if this is true, is not just a vault, it is a threshold. A place where something from before the Emperor's time bleeds through into the material world. And while the Emperor might have the power to cage it, only the Custodes can ensure the cage is never touched, never weakened, never remembered. Unlike the Astartes, the Custodes are not born of mass production or cloned gene seed. Each is handcrafted by the Emperor's own original principles, each a soul-hewn exemplar. Their psychic imprint is so refined that in proximity to warp anomalies, they act like tuning forks, not resisting the corruption, but harmonizing its disharmony, canceling it by sheer presence. That is why they patrol near the crater, not to repel invaders, but to suppress echoes, to drown out the heartbeat of something that should never stir. A former inquisitor, long since disavowed and declared rogue, once wrote a treatise titled Lunar Dialectics, the Custodes and the Unspoken Function. It was destroyed by the Ordo redactor within days of its publication. But scattered pages still circulate in the Black Archives. One fragment reads, "They do not speak because words have power. They walk not to monitor, but to mend the skin of reality itself." The crater is not a thing, it is a wound, and they are the scabs it forms to survive. The metaphor is grotesque, but chilling. What if the custodians are not simply watchers, but a patchwork barrier, holding back the seepage of a truth too immense to name? Others suggest the Golden Room is a fail-safe, a weapon of such unbearable magnitude that only the Emperor himself could activate it, and the Custodes remain not to guard its misuse, but to protect the Imperium from ever realizing what power lies dormant. In this view, the crater is not a tomb or a vault, but the shell of a weaponized thought, a psychic singularity wrapped in containment fields so fine they warp local probability. The Custodes' presence would then be an act of active cancellation, living codes of emperor-given divinity ensuring the trigger is never pulled. And there is the matter of the golden echoes. Custodes stationed near the site have, very rarely, been observed to stop mid-step, to turn slowly toward the crater's center, and for a moment, no more than a breath, they stand in silence, head tilted as though listening to something. And then, as if shaking off a dream, they return to their patrol. This phenomenon is never acknowledged in the official logs. But the Sisters of Silence who sometimes accompany them note it down, and their words are chillingly consistent. He is still speaking, but not to us. The Mechanicus has always yearned for truth, not the malleable humankind, but the deep, immutable axioms of the cosmos. To a tech priest, the universe is a cathedral of locked doors, and every scrap of knowledge is a sacred key. Nowhere is this hunger more tortured, more hushed than on Luna. The tech priests, assigned to the moon's many forges and biodomes, live in perpetual proximity to something they are never allowed to name. The Golden Room is not listed in their archives, but its echoes still bleed through newspheric chants and machine prayers. It is a point of maddening curiosity, precisely because it should not be one. A dead zone of data in a domain built entirely of information. They call it the silence at the core. A place where vox signals die without warning, where data tethers sever themselves, and where picked feeds return only static shot through with golden afterimages. Tech priests attempting to study the crater are not merely discouraged. They are reassigned, purged, or in more extreme cases, quietly converted into servitors. The higher ranks of the Martian priesthood deny that such a zone exists. And yet, there is a pattern. Forge Luna Primus, despite its massive scale, never expands eastward beyond a certain longitude. Survey drones orbiting too close fail to transmit and must be physically recovered. And more than once, exploratory deep-bore operations have encountered resistance. Not rock or metal, but geometries that defy drill logic. Structures that actively deflect incursion. It is within these censored limits that here techs whisper among themselves of something holy, something terrifying. They speak of the Golden Schema, a theoretical machine code believed to originate from the dark age of technology, whose runic patterns suggest not construction but command. Not build this, but bind this. These symbols, so the whispers go, are tattooed across the internal walls of the Golden Room, not in ink, but etched by microscopic graviton sculpting tools impossible even for the fabricator general himself to replicate. One heretic sect, the Lathes of Isol, claim that the Golden Room is not an artifact, but a containment field, a device in itself, forged not to operate, but to prevent the operation of something else. The Adeptus Mechanicus has sent its most devout and brilliant to die on that threshold. And not all who go return mad or dead. Some change. A few emerge quiet, their binheric speech muted, their mechanical augmentations flickering with residual golden glow. One Magos, famously, returned to Mars and immediately entered permanent stasis without explanation. Another renounced the cult Mechanicus altogether and wandered into the Eye of Terror, claiming he had seen a truth that inverted the entire logic of machine spirit doctrine. These anomalies are scrubbed, of course, all logs expunged. But the tech priests of Luna do not forget. They simply stop asking questions, or they begin asking the wrong ones. There are forbidden workshops buried beneath layers of misinformation where rogue magi attempt to replicate what little they've extracted from the region near the crater. They build miniature versions of the supposed Golden Seal, believing that by imitating its patterns, they might capture its power. The results are catastrophic. Machines collapse into molten slag, time slows or loops in their vicinity, and in one case, an entire research cell disappeared from Luna's crust, only to reappear 6 seconds later, embedded in the walls of a Martian forge 2 systems away, fused with the steel, screaming in syncopated binary. These heretical factions, branded as insane by the ecclesiarchy and hunted by the Ordo Hereticus, remain convinced that the Golden Room is a forgotten gift from the Men of Gold. A piece of pre-fall human divinity too great to be allowed understanding. Others believe it is a cipher, a device meant to communicate with a non-human intelligence buried deep beneath the moon's surface. Something that arrived not by warp or void ship, but from within the folds of time itself. In either case, they regard the Emperor's silencing of the site not as protection, but as theft. The heretics are wrong, of course, or worse, they may be right. That is the nature of this mystery. Every answer spirals into greater madness. The Mechanicus knows better than to tamper further. Yet their silence breeds only more heresy. Every denied request for excavation becomes sacred scripture to those who would dare. Every unexplained death, a martyrdom. And so, beneath the surface of Luna, the forges hum with both loyalty and treason, their servitor-run furnaces unaware that just beneath their spires, a deeper machine lies dormant. A machine built not to function, but to contain. A machine that may not be a machine at all. It is too easy to imagine the Emperor as a being of supreme control, orchestrating the rise of the Imperium with cold precision. But what if there were moments, even fleeting ones, when he faltered? When he encountered something that did not bow to his vision, but defied it so fundamentally that he could not conquer it, only contain it? The Golden Room may be the scar of one such moment, not a testament to the Emperor's power, but to his limits and his burden. The Emperor walked Luna long before he revealed himself to Terra. He was not yet a god to be worshipped, but a traveler through aeons of human agony, piecing together the strands of civilization from the wreckage of old night. Some say he found the crater already there, silent, ancient, and wrong. Others whisper that he made it, tearing open the moon's crust to bury what had followed him from beyond the stars. In either telling, the burden is the same. The Emperor faced something he could not destroy. And that is the secret that drives the Golden Room. He locked it away, not to protect humanity, but because he had no other choice. This burden is reflected in the silence of the Imperial records. We have archives on the creation of the Astronomican, on the war in heaven, on the gene-wrought campaigns of unification. But on the moon's oldest crater, nothing. As though a god turned his face away and commanded the galaxy to forget. But forgetting is not the same as erasing. Within certain vaults, buried beneath psychic wards and digital misdirection, fragments remain. Sealed orders issued in the Emperor's own voice, commanding the construction of containment systems that predate even the first prototypes of the Primarch project. Systems not meant for a prison, but for a tomb, or perhaps a womb. What did the Emperor see? What was so monstrous or sacred or true that even he could not bring himself to share it? Theories abound that he found a shard of himself from a timeline that should not exist. That he encountered an echo of the first sentient thought, weaponized by time. That beneath the moon is not a threat to humanity, but its first blueprint, untouched, perfect, and therefore intolerable to a galaxy steeped in war and failure. The burden then was not just to hide it, but to deny it, to ensure that no one, not even himself, could ever look upon it again without risking the unraveling of his entire purpose. The Golden Room is not guarded like a vault. It is shunned like a grave. And yet the mechanisms that hold it sealed are the most intricate in Imperial history. Psychic seals calibrated to the Emperor's unique resonance, material science that defies replication, chronostasis loops maintained by forgotten algorithms written in languages older than Earth. This was not precaution. This was penance, a constant, cosmic act of guilt transcribed into architecture. We often speak of the Emperor as the architect of the Imperium's future. But what if the Golden Room is the final echo of his past, a single moment where he turned from creator to jailer, where he confronted not the worst of humanity, but the best, and found it incompatible with the war he would soon wage? There is a cruel irony in that thought, that the Emperor, in all his divine majesty, might have buried hope beneath the moon, not because it was evil, but because it was too good to survive the galaxy he was about to forge. This theory is what haunts the more introspective among the Adeptus Custodes, that their watch is not over a threat, but over a secret that could unmake everything. That the Emperor's greatest burden was not simply his knowledge of the future, but what he had to sacrifice to create it. And that somewhere deep within the Golden Room, behind the silence and the stasis and the light that should not flicker, is something that remembers being loved, something that still waits. There are sounds on Luna that do not belong. They are not the clatter of servitors, nor the hum of cogitators, nor the rumble of subterranean mining. They are not even true sounds, strictly speaking. They are psychic vibrations, reverberations through the veil of reality itself, echoes that press against the minds of those sensitive enough to hear them. The crater surrounding the Golden Room hums with such echoes, not always and not predictably, but often enough that the Inquisition has files labeled simply Vault of Echoes. These phenomena were first documented not by psychers, but by astropathic error. In the early days of the Imperium's lunar dominance, astropaths stationed in low orbit began reporting corrupted messages, images bleeding with gold, voices layered with unnatural harmonics, the presence of a watcher that did not speak, but listened. At first, these anomalies were dismissed as warp interference, but they did not conform to known patterns. They were localized, precise, and most disturbingly, they repeated. Over time, the incidents escalated. Dreams bled into waking visions. Navigators recoiled from Luna with expressions of horror. One reported seeing a door beneath skin, throbbing with memory. As the psychic phenomena accumulated, the Ordo Malleus intervened. They dispatched sanctioned witch-seekers and choirs of bound psychers to the moon. Their findings were sealed, their names expunged. But some whispers remain. The psychers spoke of a presence buried deep, not malevolent, but overwhelming. Not a daemon, but a memory given shape. A gestalt thought form, one not of the warp, but of something older, more primal. Not a thing that feeds on fear, but one that feeds on remembrance. The Vault of Echoes, then, is not a place in the conventional sense. It is a psychic projection radiating outward from the Golden Room, a slow, ceaseless murmur of something dreaming or remembering beneath the moon's crust. What is most unsettling is that the echoes do not always match any known language. Sometimes they are pre-Old Earth dialects. Sometimes they mimic the voices of those nearby, perfectly pitched but impossibly warped. And in rare cases, they match no known phoneme structure, suggesting a linguistic matrix wholly alien to human cognition. Black ships sent to investigate have suffered strange fates. Some return seemingly unaffected, their crews silent and glass-eyed. Others vanish completely. One, the Ardent Blade, reappeared 3 years after its disappearance, its internal chronometers reading mere minutes of travel time. Its crew was gone, but the ship itself was intact, engines dead, and its Vox systems emitting a low golden hum. The Adeptus Mechanicus scrapped the vessel entirely. No data was preserved, at least not publicly. Among the Sisters of Silence, the Vault is an article of quiet dread. Though immune to its psychic influences, they feel its absence, the void where thought should be. Some report headaches, a rare phenomenon for them. Others experience somatic symptoms, nosebleeds, trembling hands, or uncontrollable weeping. They describe it as a pressure behind the mind, a sort of mental gravity drawing inward. And once they leave the proximity of the crater, they often suffer from long-term mental degradation, a slow erosion of linguistic function or emotional stability. The Vault of Echoes has also produced material anomalies. Scrolls stored within ecclesiarchal archives near Luna have rewritten themselves. Relics begin to vibrate or emit light. Even statues have cracked spontaneously when facing the moon. These phenomena are treated as signs by the faithful, but to those who know of the Golden Room, they are warnings. Warnings that something within still lives, or remembers being alive. What makes the Vault of Echoes so haunting is its persistence. It does not scream or lash out like a warp entity. It simply exists, endlessly murmuring its truth into the minds of those who dare to come close. And that truth, whatever it is, does not wish to be forgotten. It presses against the fabric of reality, not with violence, but with longing. Like a child knocking softly from behind a wall, asking not to be feared, but to be remembered. The Astronomican is a beacon, a song of psychic fire sung by 10,000 souls, focused through the shattered golden will of the Emperor himself. It reaches across the stars, guiding humanity through the darkness. But even that light does not illuminate all things. Sometimes in its endless chant, something else listens. And sometimes, just sometimes, it answers. Among the myriad voices in the Astronomican choir, a few have begun to report dreams, visions that do not feel like their own. Images not born from warp storms or daemon whispers, but from something far closer, something lunar, something buried. These dreams are not uniform. One psyker sees a room of gold, impossibly vast yet suffocating. Another walks a hallway that loops back into itself, always ending in a single sealed door. Some see a throne without a ruler, others a cradle that rocks despite no presence. What binds them all is the moon, Luna, always hanging overhead or underfoot, a presence both welcoming and condemning, and always, always the color gold. Not the cold sheen of Mechanicus alloys, but a living gold, warm, pulsing, organic, like light filtered through blood. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica has grown increasingly uneasy. These visions are not consistent with known warp phenomenon. They lack the aggression of demonic intrusion or the chaos of uncontrolled psychic bleed. They are structured, patterned. Some even contain encoded information, symbols matching those etched into the noospheric silence zones near Luna's crater. One choir mistress went so far as to suggest these are not dreams at all, but messages, memories, residual thoughts bleeding through the Emperor's own psychic presence, caught like silt in the vast current of the Astronomican. If true, this has horrifying implications. It suggests the Emperor, perhaps unconsciously, is still psychically connected to whatever lies beneath the moon. That even as he burns his soul to light the Imperium, a portion of him is still listening to the sealed vault. And worse, that something within the Golden Room is whispering back. Some telepaths speak of the second voice, a harmonic layered beneath the Astronomican's core frequency. It is not louder. It is not even distinct, but when filtered through certain psychic resonance chambers, it resolves into a whisper. I remember. The ecclesiarchy dismisses these claims as heresy. The Adeptus Custodes remains silent. But among rogue scholars, especially those once affiliated with the Ordo Chronos, there is growing concern that the Golden Room is a temporal locus, that it is not just sealed in space, but suspended in time. That these dreams are echoes not only from beneath Luna, but from a future that should not be, or from a past that refuses to stay buried. In either case, the implication is staggering, that the Astronomican, meant to be humanity's guiding light, is now tangled with a shadow that cannot be unmade. Some psychers do not wake from these dreams. Their minds collapse inward, not in madness, but in quiet surrender, as if they have been called home. Others attempt escape, suicide, heretical acts, even warp jumps into unsanctioned space, desperate to flee a voice they can neither name nor explain. Those who survive describe a longing, a terrible comfort, as though the voice from beneath the moon is not malevolent, but maternal, as though it wants not worship or domination, but to be found, to be known. There are those who believe the Emperor made a mistake, that in burying whatever lies in the Golden Room, he severed a part of himself so deeply that it now bleeds into the Astronomican, a wound inside the beacon, a whisper in the light, and that every day as humanity charts its course through the stars, it is being ever so slightly pulled toward the moon, not by gravitational force, but by narrative gravity. The story the Emperor tried to lock away is still being told, through dreams, through echoes, through the golden light that guides us. Not a beacon of salvation, but of remembrance. And if we remember it fully, if we ever understand what the Golden Room truly is, what happens then? Does the voice stop, or does it begin to speak louder? The lunar paradox begins simply enough with a map, or rather, with the absence of one. In a galaxy-spanning empire that charts entire star systems in obsessive detail, there exists no consistent, verifiable chart of Luna's oldest crater. Every survey, every satellite scan, every cartographic attempt to document the area returns different data. Crater size shifts minutely but measurably between scans. Landmarks vanish or reappear. Coordinates lead to impossible terrain, sheer cliffs where flat plains stood days before, or geometric patterns carved into the dust that no one admits to carving. This is not mere error. It is systemic inconsistency. And it is deliberate. The Adeptus Cartographica refuses to acknowledge the discrepancy. Their official records show a smooth, undisturbed basin, unremarkable, devoid of resource or historical import. But any field operative who has been near the site knows otherwise. Vox equipment malfunctions. Auspex readouts loop or return data in archaic formats, no longer used. Machine spirits become hostile or unresponsive. A survey team once reported seeing their own coordinates reflected back at them, as if the crater were broadcasting a false image, a psychic camouflage of sorts. When asked for explanations, senior scribes often recite a single phrase. "The moon corrects." This phrase has entered occult parlance among certain sects of the Ordo Xenos and Chronos alike. It implies that Luna is not merely the location of the Golden Room, but its accomplice, that the moon has been altered, physically or metaphysically, to obscure the truth of the vault. It is known that the Emperor manipulated planetary and lunar bodies during the early unification period. Could he have rewritten the moon's very physical law? Or inserted a data virus into reality itself, one that retroactively edits perception and memory? The evidence is circumstantial but chilling. Consider the phenomenon of the loop glitch. Vox recordings made near the crater will occasionally replay their own transmissions seconds before the actual event takes place. Spoken phrases echo before they're uttered. Audio logs show playback of conversations not yet had. In extreme cases, Vox logs contain speech patterns that precisely match dead individuals, sometimes matching their final words, even though they died hundreds of years earlier. Attempts to trace the cause reveal a maddening spiral of self-referencing data. At the center of that spiral, golden frequency pulses that match no known encryption. This time displacement effect is not limited to audio. Servitor clocks desynchronize in strange increments, always Fibonacci-derived, always golden ratio-based. Some servitors simply freeze and resume hours later, unaware of the lapse. Others begin speaking in past tense about events not yet observed. The Mechanicus dismisses these incidents as temporal harmonics instability, but behind closed doors, the term Chronos feedback resonance is whispered, an event known only to occur near significant warp locus sites or paradox engine emissions. The lunar paradox extends to human memory. Records stored in cogitators within a certain radius of the crater degrade faster than elsewhere. Data wipe events increase in frequency, and backup redundancies are mysteriously corrupted. Human personnel stationed near the crater for extended periods report memory loss, not from trauma or decay, but as if events have been quietly edited from their minds. One astropath recounted a 2-week mission only to discover she'd never been assigned there. Her logs existed, but her memories did not. Her mind was clean, her will unbroken, but she remembered nothing. And what of architecture? Lunar installations near the site report inconsistent blueprints. Floor plans that once looped in simple circles become endless spirals. Maintenance tunnels vanish or open into new, undocumented areas. When queried, the cogitator schematics update themselves, as if correcting the questioner rather than answering the question. On 2 separate occasions, entire buildings have relocated several meters without any signs of movement. No seismic trace, no damage, just reappearance in a new position. The ultimate question becomes, is the lunar paradox a defense mechanism of the Golden Room, or its byproduct? Does the vault deliberately warp the reality around it to remain hidden, or does its mere existence rupture the rules of causality and memory? Either answer is terrifying. If it is a defense, it implies an intelligence capable of rewriting perception itself. If it is a byproduct, then the truth buried in the crater is so vast that reality cannot help but bend in its presence. The moon watches, but it also edits, and somewhere in the shifting dust and golden light, there is a story that refuses to be told straight. Rogue traders are the spearheads of imperial exploration, granted authority to go where even the Inquisition hesitates. They are granted void-faring freedom not because they are trusted, but because they are expendable. So when one of them turns their eye inward, to Luna, to home, it draws attention from all the wrong places. And when they aim their curiosity at the oldest crater on the moon, they often vanish, not in fire or warp breach, but in bureaucratic silence. As if their deeds were unworthy of deletion because they were never meant to happen at all. There are records, fragmented, redacted, barely preserved in the data caches of the Navis Nobilite and the Ordo Chronos, that speak of at least 5 sanctioned rogue trader expeditions into the crater region. Their motivations vary. One sought relics of pre-imperial technology, rumored to be hidden beneath the moon. Another claimed to possess coordinates delivered through a dream. A third was paid in secret by a high-ranking tech priest, whose name is now blank in all archives, save for a single corrupted pict of a cod-toothed mask and a golden eye. The fate of these expeditions reads like a grim litany of contradiction. The Celestial Acquirer launched a mining drone cluster into the crater's depths. The drones returned images of vast underground halls, miles long, built not from stone or metal, but a smooth, golden substance that reflected no light. Moments later, the transmission ended. When the trader attempted to retrieve the drones, the landing craft froze mid-air and shattered without impact. The crew suffered synchronized cardiac arrest. The ship returned to port on autopilot, its navigational cogitator whispering in high Gothic. Entry denied, memory retained. The vast ransom, an old and honor-tarnished vessel, made landfall directly within the crater. It transmitted one final burst of data before silence, an image of what appeared to be a vast seal, inscribed with letters not seen since the time of the Men of Gold. The ship was later discovered in lunar orbit, crewless, its bridge covered in melted wax from candles that no one had placed. The interior was coated in a fine gold dust, corrosive to mechadendrites, but harmless to flesh. No explanation has ever been accepted. The Inquisition considers such expeditions criminal folly, but others, the risk-takers, the heretical archaeoxenologists, the death-seeking prophets, see them as revelations. They believe the crater is not a prison, but an invitation, that the descent is not forbidden because it is dangerous, but because it might succeed. The Golden Room in this vision is a test, a final doorway, a place that filters truth from greed, will from want. Only those who descend not to plunder but to remember are said to return. There are unverified tales, always told by third parties, always ending in retraction or death, of one trader who did return. She had no ship. She was found in the hallowed catacombs beneath Mars, naked, gold-dusted, speaking in binary tongues no tech priest could replicate. She claimed to have stood in the Golden Room, seen its light, and spoken with the dreaming mind that watches. She claimed it asked her a question. When pressed for what that question was, she smiled and replied, "What do you remember of your first birth?" She was executed within the hour, though her corpse was never interred, vanishing during transport with no trace. Some traders still try, quietly. They forge new warrants under false banners, commission orbital drop pods from heretic factions, install cognitive masking fields to avoid detection. They descend in silence, hoping to reach what no one else has. They never return. And yet the crater remains unchanged, unscarred, its perimeter as pristine as ever, as if it swallows not just those who seek it, but the very concept of being sought. The forbidden descent is not marked by death, it is marked by erasure. The ultimate refusal not of life, but of legacy. The crater does not warn, it does not cry out, it does not rage, it simply waits. And when another soul dares to fall into its golden gravity, it welcomes them in silence. As if whispering, "You were never here." There are places where time flows like a river, others where it pools, stagnant and thick. But beneath the crust of Luna, within the crater that holds the Golden Room, time behaves like a knot, twisted, overlapping, impossible to unravel. The phenomenon has been called many things by the few who know of it: chrono-collapse, temporal dissonance, warp burn. But among the most secretive of the ordo-chronos, it has a different name: warp-stitched time. They believe that beneath the moon, time was not merely fractured, it was sewn together again. Badly. The earliest hints came not from time travelers or sanctioned chrononauts, but from the remnants of picked recordings taken near the crater. In one set of frames, shadows moved backwards even as the figures casting them moved forward. In another, dust settled into footprints before any were made. These were dismissed as data corruption. But further incidents defied even that excuse. An Imperial survey team encountered an abandoned rover, one marked with their own regimental sigil. It was identical in every way, even down to serial codes, but it had not yet been built. And the most terrifying incident involved a Kronos agent who returned from a 5-minute recon sortie with 3 months' worth of beard growth and a face lined with memories he could not express. His body had aged, his mind had seen futures he couldn't describe, and his last words before disintegration, spontaneous cellular breakdown triggered by temporal friction, were, "It's not what we buried, it's when." This has led to radical theories. One is that the Golden Room is not stationary in time, that it drifts, perhaps cyclically, through multiple temporal strata, sometimes touching the past, sometimes brushing against futures that will never come to pass. Another theory posits that it exists in all times at once, but only partially, like a waveform collapsed only in certain frequencies. always watching, always waiting. In this model, the room is not a vault. It is an event, an ongoing, unending act of becoming. Some heretics theorize that the crater itself is the result of a failed attempt to delete a timeline, that the Emperor, in his unmatched foresight, once birthed a future so catastrophic it could not be allowed to exist, and that the only way to erase it was to trap its fulcrum in a paradox prison. The Golden Room, then, would be the scar left by that excision. Not a place, but the edge of a wound in time itself. And the being, or truth, locked within would not be a threat in the traditional sense, but a living contradiction, a thing whose mere presence could cause the past and future to eat themselves. Time behaves strangely around the crater. Rituals meant to last hours stretch into days without notice. Mechanical timers loop back mid-cycle. In one instance, a team of Mechanicus surveyors emerged from a 3-hour mission to discover the Imperium had aged 10 years. Their own ship had been scrapped, their families long buried, and they remembered nothing unusual except a soft humming, like a lullaby with no beginning and no end. More disturbing still are the ripple events. These are small changes, usually noticed only by the most obsessive of archivists. Names altered, birth dates rewritten, moments of personal history restructured in ways too precise to be coincidence. A child once thought stillborn, now alive and enrolled in Schola Progenium. A captain of the guard missing an arm that no one recalls him losing. When traced back, all affected individuals have one thing in common: proximity to the lunar crater during key moments of their life or the lives of their ancestors. If the Golden Room is indeed a fulcrum, then it may be that all of Terra, and perhaps all of humanity, is balanced upon it. That the Emperor did not merely seal a secret, but a possibility. A future that must not be, and yet always nearly is. A timeline that tries to force itself into being through dreams, anomalies, glitches in reality. Each attempt reshaping the tapestry just a little. Each echo making the knot tighter. The warp, of course, is not passive in this. It reacts to paradox like a wound to infection. Psychers report dreams in which they speak to versions of themselves who never lived. The fabric of warp space near Luna is thin, not with demonic activity, but with reverberations, vibrations of time unraveling and refolding in endless loops. Ships translated too close to Luna have emerged eons later or moments before their departure. Some return bearing signs of futures that haven't happened. Others arrive with crew members who do not exist. The Golden Room holds the key, not just to what was locked away, but to the very structure of causality in the Sol system. And each time someone tries to understand it, each time someone even looks too closely, the threads fray further. What lies inside may not be sleeping. It may be stitching, quietly, endlessly, trying to weave itself into a reality that no longer has room for it. If the Golden Room were ever breached, truly breached, not skimmed by rogue scans or grazed by unauthorized landings, the Imperium would never be the same. The very concept of stability, of linear time, of identity and memory could begin to unravel. That is the whispered terror behind every protocol, every custodian patrol, every forbidden archive sealed in data vaults deep beneath Terra. Because the Golden Room is not merely a prison, it is a promise. And that promise is built on the unspoken horror of what happens when the vault opens. Speculation is dangerous, but inevitable. Among the highest tiers of the Inquisition and the few surviving Ordo Chronos operatives, the leading theory is existential rupture. That the vault contains not a creature, not a weapon, but a temporal fulcrum, the embryonic form of a timeline rejected by the Emperor. If released, this unmanifest future would not overwrite the current one instantly. Instead, it would overlap it, phasing in like a ripple in reality, causing fractures in causality. People would begin to remember lives they never lived. Machines would operate according to principles no longer valid. Wars would start before they were declared. Empires would fall and rise in the same breath. Some believe the entity or construct within is the Primarch that was never born. Not one of the lost two, but something older, something greater. A being designed not for war or conquest, but for remembrance. A perfect synthesis of soul, flesh, and temporal awareness. A memory given form, capable of bending history itself. The Emperor, unable to destroy such a being, may have chosen to seal it, fearing that its awakening would negate the entire premise of the Imperium. If this is true, then opening the vault would not just awaken a forgotten child of the Emperor, it would awaken a judgment. A question posed to the galaxy: what would you have been, had you remembered rightly? Other interpretations are darker still, that the Golden Room holds not a being, but a thought. A pure psychic construct so vast, so old, that it exists only in stasis because time itself must pause to contain it. Such a thought, if released, could infect the minds of the entire Imperium in seconds. Not like chaos, with screaming madness and mutation, but with perfect, gentle clarity. A single understanding so absolute that it would erase all belief, all fear, all hierarchy. Faith would collapse. The ecclesiarchy would burn from the inside, their gods revealed as misremembered echoes. The Adeptus Mechanicus would face a machine code more elegant than anything the Omnissiah ever whispered. There are prophecies, tattered, fragmentary, deemed heretical by every order that matters, that speak of the returning moment. They describe a time when the moon will bleed light, when the earth will weep golden tears, and when the past will step forward to claim its due. These texts describe no apocalypse, no battle. They describe an ending without violence, a soft, irreversible shift in awareness. As if all of humanity, in a single moment, would simply remember. Not just the horrors, but the truth of what it was meant to be. And then there is the silent contingency, known only as Luna Null. A final order command code, inscribed in the darkest layer of the Mechanicus' most secure vaults, linked to the presence of 5 specific astronomical events. If these stars align and a specific resonance frequency is detected emanating from Luna, the order is activated. The order is simple: sterilize the moon. Every forge, every temple, every life, erased, with cyclonic torpedoes if necessary. The code requires 5 simultaneous confirmations, from the Lord Commander Militant, the Master of the Astronomican, the Grand Master of Assassins, the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes, and the High Lord of the Officio Medicae. That code has never been enacted, but the stars are drifting, and the resonance has begun to hum. So what happens if the vault opens? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps the Emperor built the perfect lock. But even the perfect lock only holds until the key is found. Or worse, until the thing inside no longer cares about locks. The moon does not tremble, it waits. The moon watches still. It does not move, not truly. It drifts around Terra, ever faithful, ever patient. But those who know, those who have read the black scrolls and decrypted the burned remnants of forgotten inquisitorial logs, understand that Luna is not passive. It is a mask. A blindfold over an eye that must never open. For beneath that ancient crater lies something that the Imperium has never dared to name, something too sacred or too dangerous, or perhaps both, to be destroyed. It is not guarded by armies, but by forgetfulness, not shielded by walls, but by silence, and that silence hums louder with every passing year. Even now, 10,000 years into the long vigil, the stories persist, of flickering lights under the regolith, of gold-flecked dreams in the minds of those who sleep beneath the moon, of vox static that resolves into lullabies when no one is listening. These are dismissed as anomalies, malfunctions, coincidence. But those with the wit to listen understand. The Golden Room still breathes, still stirs. Not with life, perhaps, but with memory. Memory is the true enemy of the Imperium. Not heresy, not rebellion. For every rebellion can be crushed, every heresy purged. But memory endures. Memory is unkillable. And somewhere beneath that crater lies a memory so pure, so old, that the Emperor himself deemed it incompatible with the world he had to build. He did not destroy it. He sealed it. Perhaps out of mercy, perhaps out of guilt, or perhaps like any parent with a true truth too painful to bear, he simply could not bring himself to watch it fade. And so we watch in his place. We keep vigil. We build cathedrals and spires and forges across the moon, never too close, never asking why. We send custodians to pace the perimeter in silent, perfect rhythms. We burn books that speak of golden halls. We blind psychers who dream of cradles. We erase maps that shift too often. And we never ever ask what we are guarding. Because to ask is to invite remembrance, and remembrance might invite return. Still, something in us yearns. We are creatures of myth, of legacy, of broken inheritance. The Golden Room calls not because it tempts us with power, but because it echoes with the shape of what we have lost. In its silence is a music we almost remember, a shape we see only in dreams. A home we were exiled from before we knew what it was. Perhaps that is why the crater remains untouched, not out of fear, but out of reverence. Not because we dread what lies within, but because we know that if we open it, we will see what we were meant to be, and it will break us. Or worse, it will heal us, and in that healing, unmake everything the Imperium stands upon. There is a theory so blasphemous, so quietly persistent, that it exists only in half-uttered whispers among the Ordo Redactor, in ciphered graffiti on the walls of disused lunar vaults, in the margins of forbidden diaries from defunct ecclesiarchal orders. It is not a theory of what lies within the Golden Room. It is a theory of what lies without. That the Golden Room is not unique. That it is one of many. The multiplicity hypothesis, as some have called it, suggests that the structure beneath the crater is not a solitary vault, but a node, one of a network spanning worlds long forgotten. According to this view, the Moon's Golden Room is merely the best preserved, best concealed, and most spiritually resonant of a wider lattice of similar chambers hidden throughout the Imperium and beyond. And if this is true, then the implications are staggering. That the Emperor was not sealing a single threat, but locking down an entire system of truth interconnected across worlds and epochs. Supporters of this theory cite evidence scattered across the galaxy. On Mars, deep within the Noctis Labyrinthus, redacted excavation logs reference golden architecture buried beneath the molten crust, ruins dismissed as pre-Mechanicum waste, but curiously resistant to all forms of auspex. On Caliban, before its sundering, explorers uncovered a monolith inscribed with patterns almost identical to those recorded near the lunar crater. Even on distant Vigilis, warp-touched relics have surfaced bearing the same impossible language, a script that burns into retinae without light, a language whose grammar seems to rewrite itself based on the reader's thoughts. These are not coincidences, say the believers. These are not isolated anomalies. These are resonant artifacts, fragments of a design too vast to comprehend, too deliberate to dismiss. If the Golden Room on Luna is one node, then others may lie dormant beneath 1,000 dead moons, sealed within forgotten stations drifting in the void, pulsing softly beneath the sands of planets long thought unremarkable. A pattern of containment. A net cast wide across the stars, not to catch, but to suppress. The question then becomes, what is being suppressed? What requires not one prison, but many? What memory, what being, what force was so vast that it had to be dismembered and buried piecemeal across the galaxy? Some adherents to the theory believe that what lies within the Golden Room is not a being at all, but a fragment of a consciousness, a splinter of something too large, too dangerous to ever be housed in one place. A mind that once dreamed through human souls, that once whispered across timelines and futures, guiding humanity toward a destiny we now barely remember. Others take the idea further. They claim the Emperor was not the architect of the Golden Rooms, but merely their warden. That when he rose in power, he did not build the vaults, but inherited them. And in that moment of godlike ambition, he chose to maintain the seal rather than challenge it. The Golden Room, then, becomes a throne not of authority but of fear. A monument to a bargain made before history, when the Emperor accepted the burden of ignorance in exchange for control. If there are other vaults, why has the Imperium not found them? Or worse, what if it has, and sealed them again in silence? What if certain exterminatus orders were not acts of retribution or purification, but of containment? What if the planet of Tanis VI was glassed not because of a tyrannid incursion, but because the crust was cracking and golden light had begun to leak through? What if the silence of the vaults is not maintained through secrecy, but through extinction? The Inquisition will not entertain these thoughts. The Mechanicus buries them under layers of sacred protocol and blinding data. The Ecclesiarchy brands such theories as soul-deep heresy. And yet, in certain abandoned star forts, in certain shattered librarius towers, the same dream appears again and again. A staircase of gold, spiraling down into silence. A voice calling not in command but in invitation. A map written not on parchment, but in memory. It is said that the stars remember. That before humanity even crawled from the dust of old Earth, the stars had already been marked by thought. If the multiplicity hypothesis is true, then the Golden Room is not just beneath the moon. It is within us, carried in our genetic memory, echoed in our dreams, buried in the marrow of our myth. And if there are others, if these rooms are waking, one by one, then the question is not what lies within them. The question is, when they remember, will we? So the moon watches, so we forget. And somewhere beneath the dust, the golden room glows faintly, waiting. It does not scream, it does not sing, it simply remembers. Thank you for walking with me through the silence. If you want more stories from the shadows of the Imperium, subscribe and let us remember together.